They say Christmas brings families together around warmth, love, and gratitude. But sitting at that mahogany dining table, surrounded by crystal glasses and my husband's family, all I felt was the cold bite of judgment wrapped in holiday traditions. The tree sparkled in the corner, carols played softly in the background, and everyone smiled like we were filming a holiday commercial. But beneath the surface, the air was thick with whispers, side glances, and the kind of polite cruelty that only comes from people who think they're better than you. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Isabella, and for 8 years, I had been trying to earn my place at this table. 8 years of Christmas dinners, Easter brunches, birthday celebrations, and family gatherings where I was always the outsider looking in. My husband Marcus sat beside me, laughing at his father's jokes, completely oblivious to the way his mother, Patricia, looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her designer shoe. His sister Victoria was there too, with her perfectly curated life and her condescending smile that never quite reached her eyes. I was wearing an emerald green dress I had bought specifically for tonight. Something elegant but not too flashy. Something that wouldn't give them another reason to whisper about my choices. My daughter Sophia, just 15, sat across from me, in a cream-colored sweater I had knitted for her myself. She kept glancing between me and the rest of the family, her dark eyes reading the room like she always did. Sophia had inherited my ability to see through people's masks, to sense the tension that adults tried to hide behind pleasantries. The Blackwood family had money, old money, the kind that came with expectations and traditions and an unspoken hierarchy that I was never supposed to climb. Marcus was their golden son, the investment banker who had followed in his father's footsteps, who understood the language of stocks and bonds and country club memberships. When he brought me home 8 years ago, pregnant with Sophia and working, as a freelance graphic designer, I could see the disappointment in their eyes. I wasn't what they had envisioned for their precious son. Patricia had made it clear from the beginning that I didn't belong. Not with words, never with words, but with looks, with exclusions, with the way she would talk about Marcus's ex-girlfriend Rebecca, who had gone to the right schools and came from the right family, and understood their world in a way I never could. Rebecca was still invited to family events, still treated like a daughter while I remained the interloper who had trapped their son with an unplanned pregnancy. The dining room was decorated to perfection, as always. Patricia took pride, in her entertaining, in the way she could make everything look effortless while orchestrating every detail. The Christmas tree in the corner was professionally decorated. No homemade ornaments or sentimental touches, just perfectly coordinated gold and silver baubles that caught the light from the chandelier overhead. The table was set with china that had been in the family for generations, crystal glasses that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and silver that required special care and attention. I had learned to navigate these dinners carefully over the years. I knew not to mention my work unless directly asked, not to bring up my family's more modest background, not to rock the boat in any way that might give them ammunition against me. I had become a master of polite conversation, of smiling and nodding and staying invisible while they discussed investments and vacation homes and charity galas that I was never invited to attend. But tonight felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a tension that seemed sharper than usual. Maybe it was because Sophia was getting older, more aware of the dynamics at play. Maybe it was because I had finally stopped trying so hard to fit in and started focusing on building something of my own. Or maybe it was because I was tired, bone-deep tired, of pretending that their casual cruelty didn't affect me. Marcus's father, Robert, was at the head of the table, carving the prime rib with the precision of a surgeon. He was a man who commanded respect through presence alone, someone who had built his wealth through shrewd business decisions and careful investments. He had always been polite to me, never warm, but never openly hostile like his wife. He seemed to view me as a temporary inconvenience, something Marcus would eventually outgrow once he came to his senses. Victoria was regaling the table with stories from her recent trip to the Hamptons, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone who had never worried about money a day in her life. She worked in public relations for a nonprofit, a job that sounded important but was essentially funded by her trust fund. She had never understood what it meant to build something from nothing, to fight for every opportunity, to prove yourself over and over again just to earn a seat at the table. I picked at my food, trying to appear engaged, while my mind wandered to the emails waiting in my inbox, the client calls I needed to return tomorrow, the presentation I was preparing for next week. My design company had grown significantly over the past 3 years, from a small freelance operation to a team of 12 talented designers working with major brands across the country. We had just landed our biggest contract yet, a rebranding project for a tech startup that would essentially triple our revenue for the next year. But none of that mattered here. Here, I was still just the girl who had gotten pregnant and trapped, their son, the outsider who didn't understand their world of old money and older traditions. Here, my success was invisible, my accomplishments meaningless, my worth measured only by how little I disrupted their perfectly ordered lives. Sophia was quiet tonight, more so than usual. She had always been observant, even as a small child, watching and listening and absorbing everything around her. She understood the family dynamics better than Marcus did, could see the way his mother's compliments always came with sharp edges, the way his father's politeness was really indifference, the way his sister's interest in our lives was really just gathering information for later judgment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As the evening progressed, the conversation turned to business, as it always did. Robert was discussing some new investment opportunity, something about emerging markets and calculated risks. Marcus was nodding along, trying to prove his worth through his understanding of financial concepts that had been drilled into him since childhood. Victoria was making suggestions about diversifying portfolios and managing risk, parroting advice she had heard from her financial advisor. I had learned long ago not to contribute to these conversations. The few times I had tried to share insights from running my own business, I had been met with patronizing smiles and comments about how different real business was from creative work. They didn't understand that creativity was just one part of what I did, that I also managed budgets and negotiated contracts and analyzed market trends and made strategic decisions that affected not just my own livelihood, but the livelihoods of my employees. Patricia was holding court at her end of the table, discussing the upcoming charity gala season and who would be wearing what designer to which event. She had always made it clear that these were not invitations I should expect to receive, that my presence at family dinners was obligation enough. She spoke about these events like they were the most important things in the world, as if attending parties and writing checks somehow made her a pillar of the community. The wine was flowing freely, loosening tongues and lowering inhibitions. Marcus was laughing too loudly at his father's jokes, desperate for approval that never quite came. Victoria was becoming more animated in her storytelling, her gestures getting bigger as she described the various social events she had attended. Robert was becoming more philosophical, pontificating about success and merit, and the importance of choosing the right life partner. And Patricia was sharpening her knives. I could see it in the way she was looking at me, in the way she kept steering the conversation toward topics designed to highlight my differences, my deficiencies, my unworthiness to be part of their family. She was building toward something, gathering momentum like a storm that had been brewing all evening, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Sophia sensed it too. I could see her straightening in her chair, her attention focusing more intently on the conversation. She had inherited my protective instincts, my ability to sense danger even when it came wrapped in polite conversation and holiday cheer. She was watching her grandmother with the intensity of someone who knew exactly what Patricia was capable of when she set her mind to destroying someone. The moment came, as I knew it would, just as dessert was being served. Patricia had arranged for an elaborate Christmas pudding, something traditional and expensive that required special preparation and imported ingredients. She was explaining the history of the recipe, how it had been passed down through generations of Blackwood women, how it represented continuity and tradition and family values. And then, with the timing of someone who had been planning this moment all evening, she looked directly at me and smiled that cold, calculated smile I had come to know so well. The table fell quiet, sensing the shift in energy. Marcus looked, up from his pudding, finally picking up on the tension that had been building all night. Victoria stopped mid-sentence, her attention turning toward her mother with the anticipation of someone who knew entertainment was about to begin. Robert set down his spoon, his expression neutral but alert. Sophia's hand found mine under the table, her fingers squeezing tight in a gesture of solidarity that reminded me I wasn't alone in this room full of people who had never accepted me. Her presence gave me strength, reminded me that no matter what Patricia was about to say, no matter how she tried to diminish me, I had raised a daughter who saw my worth even when others couldn't. The chandeliers cast everything in golden light, making the whole scene feel theatrical, like we were all actors in a play that had been rehearsed many times before. But tonight, I had the strange feeling that the script was about to change, that the role I had been playing for 8 years was finally about to be rewritten. Patricia raised her wine glass, the crystal catching the light as she prepared to deliver whatever blow she had been planning all evening. The room held its breath, waiting for the words that would either break me down once again or finally give me the opportunity to stand up and fight back. I wasn't always the target of Patricia, Blackwood's carefully orchestrated cruelty. There was a time, brief as it was, when Marcus looked at me like I was his entire world, when the future stretched ahead of us filled with possibilities and dreams we were going to build together. We met during what I now realize was the most transformative period of my life, though I didn't know it then. I was 26, working as a freelance graphic designer while taking night classes in business management. My days were a blur of client meetings, design deadlines, and textbooks, spread across my tiny kitchen table. I had grown up in a working-class family where my mother cleaned office buildings at night, and my father drove delivery trucks during the day. They had immigrated from Colombia, with nothing but determination and the belief that hard work could create opportunities for their children that they never had themselves. Education was everything in our household. My parents worked multiple jobs to pay for my college tuition, refusing to let me take on the debt that would have crippled my future before it began. I graduated with a degree in graphic design and a minor in business, but more importantly, I graduated with an understanding that success wasn't inherited. It was earned through persistence, creativity, and the willingness to take risks when others played it safe. Marcus was different then. He had just started his first job at his father's investment firm, full of idealism about changing the family business from the inside, about bringing fresh perspectives to old money traditions. We met at a coffee shop in downtown where I was working on a logo design for a local restaurant. He was there with his laptop, preparing for a presentation about sustainable investing, trying to convince his father's firm to consider environmental and social factors in their investment strategies. He was handsome in that effortless way that comes from good genetics and better grooming, but what attracted me wasn't his appearance. It was his passion when he talked about making business more ethical, about using money as a force for positive change rather than just accumulation. He seemed genuinely interested in my work, asking thoughtful questions about design principles and client relationships. He didn't talk down to me or assume that creative work was somehow less valuable than financial analysis. Our courtship was a whirlwind of late-night conversations about changing the world, weekend trips to art galleries and farmers markets, dinners at small restaurants where we debated everything from politics to philosophy. He seemed fascinated by my background, by the stories of my parents' journey to America, by my determination to build something meaningful with my talents. I was equally intrigued by his desire to rebel against his family's expectations, To prove that privilege could be used responsibly, the first time he brought me home to meet his family, I was naive enough to believe that love would be enough to bridge any differences. I wore my best dress, a navy blue number I had saved for months to buy, and I prepared conversation topics that I thought would show them I was worthy of their son. I had researched the family's business interests, practiced discussing current events, even read up on the charitable organizations Patricia supported. The evening was a masterclass in polite rejection. Patricia complimented my dress while somehow making it clear that it wasn't quite appropriate for their dining room. Robert asked about my work in a way that suggested graphic design was a hobby, rather than a profession. Victoria peppered me with questions about my family background that felt more like an interrogation than genuine interest. Marcus, caught between worlds, tried to navigate the tension without taking sides, already beginning the pattern of neutrality that would define our marriage. But I was young and in love, and determined to prove myself worthy of their acceptance. I threw myself into learning their world, studying their customs and traditions like I was preparing for an exam. I learned which fork to use for which course, how to make small talk about charity galas and country club politics, how to dress appropriately for each type of family event. I thought if I could just master their language, their rituals, their expectations, they would eventually welcome me into their circle. When I discovered I was pregnant with Sophia, everything changed overnight. Marcus proposed immediately, not out of romance but out of obligation, his family's traditional values, demanding that he do the right thing. The wedding was small, elegant, and felt more like a business transaction than a celebration of love. Patricia made all the arrangements, choosing the venue, the flowers, the menu, even my dress, ensuring that everything reflected the Blackwood family standards rather than my personal preferences. I told myself that it didn't matter, that what we were building together was more important than how we got there. Marcus seemed genuinely excited about becoming a father, talking about the values we would instill in our child, the opportunities we could provide, the balance we would create between his family's resources and my family's work ethic. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that parenthood would unite us in a way that romance hadn't quite managed. Sophia's birth was the most transformative experience of my life. Holding her for the first time, seeing her perfect tiny fingers and the way she seemed to study the world with such intense curiosity, I felt a clarity about my purpose that I had never experienced before. This little person would depend on me not just for survival, but for guidance, for protection, for the kind of unconditional love that would give her the confidence to become whoever she was meant to be. But even in those early days of motherhood, I could feel the family dynamics shifting around me. Patricia swooped in with baby nurses and nannies, expensive equipment and designer clothes, taking control of Sophia's care in a way that made me feel like a visitor in my own daughter's life. She had strong opinions about everything from feeding schedules to educational philosophies, and Marcus consistently deferred to his mother's expertise rather than supporting my instincts as Sophia's mother. The criticism started subtly. Comments about how I held Sophia, suggestions that my milk supply wasn't adequate, recommendations for baby products that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Patricia positioned herself as the expert on child rearing, despite having raised her own children with the help of full-time staff, while treating my more hands-on approach as somehow inferior or misguided. As Sophia grew from infant to toddler, I watched Marcus slowly but steadily align himself more closely with his family's expectations and further away from the idealistic young man I had fallen in love with. His plans to reform the family business from within faded as he became more invested in proving himself worthy of inheriting his father's position. His interest in sustainable investing disappeared as he focused on generating the kind of returns that would impress Robert and secure his future within the firm. I tried to maintain my design work during Sophia's early years, taking on smaller projects that I could manage from home while caring for her. But the Blackwood family made it clear that they viewed my career as an unnecessary distraction from my primary role as Marcus's wife and Sophia's mother. They could provide everything we needed financially, they reasoned, so why was I wasting time and energy on work that took attention away from family responsibilities? The pressure was subtle but constant. Scheduling family events during times when I had client meetings, making comments about how tired I looked from trying to juggle too many responsibilities, suggesting that Sophia needed more stability and attention than I could provide while maintaining a professional life. Marcus, already struggling to balance his loyalty to me with his desire for his family's approval, began echoing their concerns about my priorities. Slowly, I felt myself shrinking. The confident, ambitious woman who had built a freelance business from nothing began second-guessing every decision, apologizing for taking up space, grateful for any scraps of acceptance the family offered. I told myself it was temporary, that, once Sophia was older, once Marcus was more established in his career, once I proved myself as a devoted family member, I would be able to pursue my own dreams again. But years passed, and the temporary sacrifices became permanent expectations. Family vacations were planned without consulting my schedule. Business dinners required my attendance as the dutiful wife, but my opinions on anything beyond household management were dismissed or ignored. Sophia's education was discussed and decided by the adults in the room who mattered, while I was expected to simply implement whatever decisions the family reached. The worst part wasn't the exclusion or the dismissal. It was watching Marcus transform from the passionate idealist I had married into a carbon copy of his father, someone who measured success only in financial terms and viewed relationships as strategic alliances rather than emotional connections. He stopped asking about my dreams, stopped encouraging my creative projects, stopped seeing me as an individual with my own aspirations and talents. I began to understand that in the Blackwood family's eyes, I wasn't a partner in building a life. With Marcus, I was an acquisition, something he had chosen poorly in a moment of weakness, a mistake that could be managed and contained but never truly integrated into their world. They treated me with the kind of polite tolerance they might show to an eccentric aunt or a problematic employee, someone whose presence was unfortunate, but whose removal would create more problems than their continued existence. The breaking point came when Sophia started school. Patricia had strong opinions about where she should attend, what activities she should pursue, what kind of social circle would be appropriate for a Blackwood granddaughter. Every conversation about Sophia's future happened around me rather than with me, as if my role was to simply execute the family's vision rather than contribute to shaping our daughter's path. That was when I made a decision that would change everything, though I didn't realize it at the time. I started working again, quietly at first, taking on small design projects while Sophia was at school. I told myself it was just to keep my skills sharp, to maintain some sense of professional identity while fulfilling my family obligations. But deep down, I knew it was about more than staying busy. It was about reclaiming a part of myself that had been slowly disappearing under the weight of Blackwood expectations. My first client was a small nonprofit that needed help with their fundraising materials. The pay was modest, but the work reminded me why I had fallen in love with design in the first place. There's something magical about taking someone's vision and translating it into visual form, about finding the perfect combination of color and typography and imagery that tells a story more powerfully than words alone ever could. Word spread quickly in the nonprofit community. Organizations that struggled with tight budgets but needed professional quality materials began reaching out. I developed a reputation for understanding their missions deeply, for creating designs that didn't just look good, but actually helped them achieve their goals. My rates were fair, my turnaround times were fast, and my commitment to their causes was genuine. Within a year, I was working with environmental groups, educational initiatives, social justice organizations, and community development projects. Each client taught me something new about the world beyond the Blackwood family's narrow sphere of influence. I was contributing to causes that mattered, using my talents to help organizations that were actually changing lives rather than just accumulating wealth. But I kept this growing success largely hidden from Marcus and his family. I knew they would find ways to diminish it, to explain why it wasn't real business success, why it didn't count in the same way their financial achievements did. I deposited my earnings into a separate account, told myself it was just play money, just a way to maintain some independence while still being the wife and mother they expected me to be. Sophia, however, was watching everything. Even as a young child, she seemed to understand that the work I was doing meant something to me in a way that family social obligations never did. She would sit quietly while I worked, sometimes offering her own creative suggestions, always sensing when I was excited about a project or frustrated with a difficult client. She saw me transform when I was designing, becoming more animated and confident and purposeful than I ever was at family gatherings. The moment arrived like a perfectly timed explosion, just as Patricia raised her crystal wine glass with that predatory smile I had learned to fear over 8 long years. The dining room fell into that particular kind of silence that precedes either celebration or devastation, and everyone at the table seemed to sense that something significant was about to unfold. "I'd like to propose a toast," Patricia announced, her voice carrying that deceptively sweet tone she reserved for her most cutting moments. "To family values, to knowing one's place, and to the importance of marrying for the right reasons rather than—" She paused dramatically, her eyes finding mine across the table. "Financial security." The words hung in the air like poison gas, seeping into every corner of the elegantly appointed room. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but said nothing, his silence a familiar betrayal that I had endured countless times before. Victoria smirked behind her napkin, clearly delighted by her mother's bold attack. Robert continued eating his dessert as if nothing had happened, his indifference somehow more crushing than active hostility would have been. But Sophia, my 15-year-old daughter who had inherited my fire along with my dark eyes, did something that none of us expected. She stood up. Not gradually, not hesitantly, but with the kind of decisive movement that commands attention. Her chair scraped against the hardwood floor, the sound cutting through the tension like a blade. Every eye in the room turned toward her, and I watched in amazement as my teenage daughter transformed before my eyes into someone who radiated the kind of quiet power that comes from absolute certainty. "Grandmother," Sophia said, her voice clear and steady despite her youth, "I think there's something you should know about my mother's financial situation." Patricia's wine glass froze halfway to her lips, her expression shifting from smug satisfaction to something approaching alarm. Marcus sat up straighter, suddenly alert to the possibility that his carefully maintained neutrality was about to be challenged. Victoria's smirk faded as she realized that the entertainment she had been anticipating might not unfold according to the script she expected. "Sophia, sweetheart," I started, reaching toward her, but she held up a gentle hand that somehow managed to be both respectful and absolutely firm. "No, Mom," she said, her eyes never leaving Patricia's face. "I think it's time they knew the truth. I think it's time they understood exactly who you are and what you've accomplished while they've been treating you like you're nothing." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs, torn between pride in my daughter's courage and terror at what she might be about to reveal. Over the past 3 years, as my design company had grown from a small side project into something substantial, I had been careful to keep the details private from Marcus's family. Not because I was ashamed of my success, but because I knew they would find ways to diminish it, to explain why it didn't matter, to use it against me somehow. "What exactly are you talking about, dear?" Patricia asked, her voice tight with the kind of control that suggested she was working very hard to maintain her composure. Sophia reached into her small purse and pulled out her phone, her fingers moving with the confident efficiency of someone who had clearly prepared for this moment. I'm talking about Luminous Design Collective, she said, her voice growing stronger, with each word. My mother's company that she's built from nothing while living in this family that treats her like she's some kind of charity case. My breath caught in my throat. Sophia knew far more about my business than I had realized, and the fact that she had been paying such close attention filled me with both pride and panic. I had tried so hard to shield her from the family dynamics, to protect her from the worst of Patricia's cruelty. But clearly my observant daughter had been taking everything in with the sharp intelligence she had inherited from both sides of her gene pool. Mom's company, Sophia continued, now looking directly at her father, has 12 full-time employees. They work with major brands across the country. They just signed a contract with TechFlow Innovations that's worth more than Dad makes in a year. The silence that followed this declaration was deafening. Marcus turned to look at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between shock and betrayal, as if my success was somehow a personal affront to him. Patricia's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup, and for the first time in 8 years, I saw something approaching fear in her eyes. That's impossible, Victoria said, her voice sharp with disbelief. Isabella works from home. She does little projects for nonprofits. That's not real business. Sophia's laugh was bright and clear, the sound of someone who knew exactly how wrong the adults in the room had been about everything. Aunt Victoria, would you like to see their client list? Because I have it right here, along with their revenue, reports, their employee roster, and the news articles about Mom's work that you've apparently never bothered to read. She was scrolling through her phone now, and I realized with a mixture of horror and admiration that my daughter had been conducting her own research into my professional life. While I had been trying to keep my two worlds separate, she had been building a comprehensive understanding of what I had accomplished in the business world that the Blackwood family had dismissed as irrelevant. The environmentally sustainable packaging designs that won the National Green Business Award last year, Sophia said, reading from her phone. That was Mom's team. The rebranding campaign for Hope Housing Initiative that increased their donations by 300%? Mom did that. The digital marketing strategy that helped Solar Solutions become the fastest-growing renewable energy company in the state? That was Mom's company, too. Each revelation hit the table like a physical blow. I watched as the family's carefully constructed narrative about my worthlessness began to crumble under the weight of actual facts. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, while Robert set down his spoon and gave me his full attention for what might have been the first time since I had married his son. Furthermore, Sophia continued, her momentum building like an avalanche gathering snow, Mom's company has been featured in Entrepreneur Magazine, Design Today, and Business Innovation Quarterly. She's been invited to speak at 3 major conferences this year about sustainable design practices and social impact business models, but I guess none of you read those publications. Marcus was staring at me now with an expression of complete bewilderment, as if I had suddenly revealed myself to be a completely different person than the one he thought he had married. Isabella, he said slowly, why didn't you tell me about any of this? Before I could answer, Sophia jumped in with the fierce protectiveness that had apparently been building inside her for years. Because you never asked, Dad. Because this family has spent 8 years treating her like she's some kind of burden, instead of recognizing that she's probably more successful than any of you. Because every time she tried to talk about her work, you changed the subject or made it clear that it wasn't important. The truth of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. I thought about all the times I had started to share news about a new client or an exciting project, only to be met with polite disinterest or not-so-subtle suggestions that I should be focusing on family responsibilities instead. I remembered the countless dinner conversations where Marcus's work was discussed in detail while mine was barely acknowledged, the family gatherings where my professional accomplishments were treated as cute hobbies rather than serious business achievements. And grandmother, Sophia said, turning back to Patricia with the kind of steady gaze that suggested she was far from finished. Since you seem so concerned about people marrying for financial reasons, maybe you should know that Mom's company is now worth approximately $3 million. Her net worth is probably higher than Dad's, and she built it all herself while taking care of me and trying to be part of a family that never appreciated her. Patricia's wine glass slipped from her fingers, hitting the edge of her dessert plate with a sharp clink that seemed impossibly loud in the stunned silence. A few drops of red wine splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth, creating stains that would probably never come out, which somehow felt appropriate given the permanent damage that was being done to the family's perception of reality. "That's not possible," Patricia whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. She was looking at me as if seeing me for the first time, and I could practically see her recalculating every interaction we had ever had through this new lens of information. Sophia was clearly prepared for skepticism. She tapped her phone screen a few more times and then turned it toward the table so everyone could see. "This is Mom's company website. This is their client portfolio. This is the news article from last month about their expansion into the European market. And this," she said, swiping to what appeared to be a financial document, "is their quarterly revenue report." I wanted to stop her, to tell her that she didn't need to defend me this way, but I was frozen by the magnitude of what was happening. My quiet, careful daughter had just systematically demolished 8 years of family mythology with nothing but facts and determination. She had turned the dinner table into a courtroom and delivered a closing argument that left no room for doubt or denial. "The nonprofit work that you've all been so dismissive of?" Sophia continued, her voice gaining strength with each revelation. "That's how Mom built her reputation. That's how she proved that she could create real value for organizations that actually matter. And now major corporations pay her team hundreds of thousands of dollars because they know that her designs don't just look good, they actually work. They actually help businesses succeed." Marcus was shaking his head slowly, as if trying to process information that didn't fit with anything he thought he knew about our marriage. "Isabella, the separate bank account, the phone calls, the meetings you said were about Sophia's school. We're about building something that would give our daughter options," I said quietly, finding my voice for the first time since the confrontation began. "Something that would show her that women don't have to depend on other people's approval or other people's money to create meaningful lives for themselves." Victoria was staring at her phone now, apparently looking up my company online, her expression shifting from skepticism to something approaching awe. "Oh my God," she murmured. "You're really her. The Isabella Martinez who designed the campaign for the Children's Hospital Foundation. My friend Sarah works there, and she said that campaign was brilliant. It raised more money in 6 months than they usually raise in 2 years. The validation from an unexpected source seemed to break something open in the room. Suddenly, everyone was talking at once, asking questions, making observations, trying to reconcile this new information with their long-held assumptions about who I was and what I was capable of achieving. But through it all, Sophia remained standing, her phone still in her hand, her expression calm and satisfied in the way of someone who had just completed a mission that she had been planning for a very long time. When the chaos of voices finally died down, she looked around the table with the kind of quiet authority that reminded me powerfully of my own mother, who had never been intimidated by anyone regardless of their wealth or social status. "I've been watching this family treat my mother like she's nothing for my entire life," Sophia said, her voice carrying a weight that seemed impossible for someone so young. "I've watched her shrink herself to try to fit into spaces that were never designed to welcome her. I've watched her apologize for taking up room, for having opinions, for existing in ways that made any of you uncomfortable." She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering what I sensed would be her final statement. "But I also watched her build something amazing while you weren't paying attention. I watched her help organizations that actually change people's lives. I watched her create jobs for other people, mentor young designers, and prove over and over again that talent and determination matter more than family connections or inherited wealth. The room was completely silent now. Everyone focused entirely on this remarkable young woman who had just rewritten the entire family narrative with the force of her conviction and the power of documented truth. I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness or frustration, but from overwhelming pride in the daughter I had raised to be brave enough to speak truth to power when it mattered most. "So, the next time any of you want to suggest that my mother married for money," Sophia concluded, sitting back down with the same decisive movement she had used to stand up, "maybe you should remember that she's probably the most financially successful person at this table, and she did it all without anyone's help or approval." The days following that transformative Christmas dinner unfolded like pages in a book I had never dared to write for myself. For the first time in 8 years, I woke up each morning without the weight of pretending to be smaller than I was, without the exhausting performance of apologizing for my existence in spaces that had never truly welcomed me. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of activity that demonstrated just how much had been suppressed beneath the surface of our family dynamics. Marcus, seemingly awakened from a decade-long trance, threw himself into understanding the business I had built. While he wasn't paying attention, he spent hours reviewing our client portfolios, asking detailed questions about our project management systems, and expressing genuine amazement at the scope of what we had accomplished. "I keep thinking about all the times you tried to tell me about your work," he said one evening as we sat in our living room, Sophia curled up between us working on college application essays. "I can remember you starting to explain projects and me cutting you off or changing the subject. I thought I was being supportive by not pressuring you to work, but I was actually being dismissive of work you were already doing." It was the kind of recognition I had craved for years, but receiving it now felt different than I had imagined. Rather than vindication or relief, what I felt was a deep sense of possibility opening up before us. We weren't just correcting past mistakes. We were creating entirely new ways of relating to each other based on truth rather than assumption. Sophia, meanwhile, had become something of a local legend among her classmates for the way she had handled the family confrontation. Word had spread through the teenage network about how she had systematically dismantled her grandmother's assumptions with nothing but facts and fierce loyalty. But more importantly, she was channeling that experience into her own creative development with an intensity that amazed me. "I've been thinking about what I want to study in college," she announced over breakfast one morning, spreading out brochures from art schools alongside academic programs. "I want to learn about social justice design, like what you do, but I also want to understand policy and law. I think there's something powerful about combining creative communication with systemic change." Watching my daughter articulate her own vision for making a difference in the world, I realized that the most profound impact of that Christmas evening wasn't on my business or my marriage, but on Sophia's understanding of what was possible for her own life. She had seen her mother refuse to be diminished, had watched truth triumph over long-held assumptions, and was now applying those lessons to her own dreams and ambitions. The business opportunities that emerged from our newfound family transparency exceeded anything I could have anticipated. Patricia, true to her word about starting over, had become an unexpected champion of our work within her extensive social network. She approached this new role with the same meticulous attention to detail she brought to all her endeavors, but now that energy was focused on opening doors rather than closing them. "I've been thinking about the museum campaign we discussed," she said during a lunch meeting that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. "But I also want to propose something more ambitious. What if we organized a symposium on the role of design in nonprofit effectiveness? I could leverage my connections to bring together foundation leaders, nonprofit executives, and design professionals for a conversation about maximizing social impact." The idea was brilliant, and it represented exactly the kind of platform that could elevate not just our company, but the entire field of mission-driven design. But more than the professional opportunity, what struck me was Patricia's genuine enthusiasm for work she was finally beginning to understand. She wasn't just tolerating my career, she was actively strategizing ways to amplify its impact. Victoria's collaboration with our team had evolved into something equally unexpected and valuable. Her nonprofit work had given her insights into organizational challenges that complemented our design expertise perfectly. Together, we were developing new service offerings that addressed the intersection of communication strategy and operational efficiency. Your approach to stakeholder mapping has revolutionized how we think about audience engagement, she told me during one of our weekly planning sessions. But I think there's an opportunity to integrate financial planning and donor development into the design process in ways that could multiply impact exponentially. These weren't conversations I could have imagined having with Marcus's family even 6 months earlier, but they were exactly the kinds of strategic discussions that energized me most. We weren't just building better relationships, we were creating new possibilities for combining our different areas of expertise in service of causes that mattered to all of us. Robert's involvement brought a dimension to our work that I hadn't anticipated, but that proved invaluable. His investment background allowed him to help our nonprofit clients think more strategically about financial sustainability and growth planning. He began attending our client meetings not as Marcus's father trying to understand his daughter-in-law's hobby, but as a strategic advisor whose insights enhanced the value we could provide. What Isabella's team does is essentially management, consulting disguised as design work, he explained to a foundation board he had connected us with. They're helping organizations optimize their operations, improve their outcomes, and scale their impact. The visual communication is just the most visible part of a much more comprehensive approach to organizational development. Having someone with his credibility and connections describe our work in those terms opened doors that would have taken years to access through traditional business development. But beyond the professional benefits, Robert's evolving understanding of what we did represented a fundamental shift in how the family valued different types of intelligence and contribution. The ripple effects extended far beyond our immediate family circle. Our employee team, energized by the new opportunities and elevated positioning, began proposing even more ambitious projects and innovative approaches. Young designers who had joined us seeking mentorship were now leading initiatives that combined their creative skills with deep social consciousness. Maria, one of our junior designers who had started as an intern 2 years earlier, approached me with a proposal that perfectly captured the spirit of transformation that seemed to be touching every aspect of our work. I want to develop a fellowship program that pairs design students with community organizations that can't afford professional services, she said, presenting a detailed plan she had developed in her spare time. We could provide the supervision and framework. The students would get real-world experience, and the organizations would get quality design support they couldn't otherwise access. It was exactly the kind of initiative that demonstrated how individual success could become a platform for creating opportunities for others. We launched the fellowship program 6 months later, and it quickly became one of the most rewarding aspects of our business, proof that growing your own influence was most meaningful when it enabled others to grow theirs as well. Sophia's college application process became an unexpected source of inspiration for our entire family. Rather than approaching it as a traditional academic exercise, she treated it as an opportunity to articulate her own vision for combining creativity with social impact. Her essays described not just what she wanted to study, but how she planned to use her education to address specific problems she had identified in the world. I want to design systems that make justice more accessible, she wrote in her personal statement. I've watched my mother use creativity to help organizations communicate more effectively with the communities they serve, and I want to apply that same principle to legal and policy frameworks that currently exclude too many people from participation. Reading her words, I realized that the courage she had shown at that Christmas dinner wasn't an isolated moment of teenage rebellion, but an expression of values and vision that would guide her throughout her life. She was already thinking about how to use whatever privileges and opportunities she accessed to create more opportunities for others. The speaking engagements that grew out of our increased visibility became platforms for sharing not just our design methodologies, but our philosophy about the relationship between individual success and collective responsibility. I found myself addressing audiences of entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and students about the importance of building businesses that created value beyond profit, careers that contributed to solutions rather than just personal advancement. Success without purpose is just accumulation, I told a group of business school students during one particularly memorable presentation. But when you align your talents with causes that matter to you, when you use your growing influence to create opportunities for others, that's when work becomes meaningful rather than just profitable. The questions that followed these presentations revealed how hungry people were for examples of what it looked like to build professional success while maintaining values and contributing to positive change. Young women, in particular, approached me afterward to share their own struggles with being underestimated or dismissed, their own dreams of creating businesses that made a difference. One conversation stayed with me long after the event ended. A graduate student named Elena told me about her idea for a company that would provide accessible design services to immigrant-owned small businesses, helping them compete more effectively, while preserving their cultural identity. "I've been afraid to pursue it because people keep telling me it's not a real business model," she said. "But seeing what you've built gives me hope that there's room for businesses that prioritize impact alongside income." 6 months later, Elena sent me a photo of her first client meeting, her face radiant with the same mixture of nervousness and determination I remembered from my own early days. She had not only launched her company, but had already hired 2 other designers and was expanding into 3 new cities. Her success was her own achievement, but knowing that our story had provided some small measure of encouragement along her journey felt like one of the most meaningful outcomes of our increased visibility. The transformation in my relationship with Marcus deepened over time as he began to understand not just what I had accomplished, but how his family's dismissal had affected both me and Sophia. He started therapy to work through his own patterns of conflict avoidance and his struggle to maintain independence from his family's expectations while still valuing their relationships. "I think I was afraid that if I really saw how strong and successful you were, I'd have to acknowledge how much I had failed you as a partner," he admitted during one of our long conversations about rebuilding our marriage on more honest foundations. "It was easier to minimize your achievements than to face how much I had contributed to making you feel invisible." The honesty was painful but necessary. We couldn't build a future together without acknowledging the ways we had both contributed to patterns that diminished rather than enhanced each other's potential. But unlike the surface-level politeness that had characterized our relationship for years, these difficult conversations were creating genuine intimacy based on truth rather than performance. Our marriage counselor helped us develop new ways of supporting each other's ambitions while maintaining our connection as a family. We learned to celebrate each other's successes without competition, to ask better questions about each other's work, and to share decision-making about both career and family priorities in ways that honored both of our contributions. The Christmas dinner 1 year later was a completely different experience. Instead of tolerating my presence, the family actively sought my input on business decisions and community initiatives. Patricia and I had developed a genuine friendship based on shared interests in philanthropy and social impact. Victoria and I were collaborating on multiple projects that combined her nonprofit expertise with our design capabilities. Robert had become both a client and an advisor, helping us navigate expansion opportunities while maintaining our mission focus. But the most significant change was in Sophia, who had grown into someone who expected to be heard, who articulated her opinions with confidence, and who approached challenges with the assumption that solutions were possible rather than problems were permanent. She had been accepted to her first-choice college with a substantial scholarship, and her plans for studying sustainable design and social policy reflected the same integration of creativity and social consciousness that had become the foundation of our family's shared values. "I want to thank you," Patricia said as we were cleaning up after dinner, a task she now shared rather than directing from a distance. "Not just for forgiving us, but for showing us what we had been missing. Watching you build something meaningful, while maintaining your integrity, has changed how I think about success and what kinds of achievements actually matter." It was the kind of recognition I had once craved but no longer needed for validation. Instead, it represented the possibility of relationships based on mutual respect and shared commitment to using whatever privileges and opportunities we had to create positive change in the world. As I write this, 3 years have passed since that transformative Christmas dinner. Our company now employs 37 people across 4 cities, and we're opening our first international office next year. We've worked with over 200 organizations, helping them improve their communications, streamline their operations, and expand their impact. Our fellowship program has provided professional experience to 43 emerging designers, while supporting more than 100 community organizations with pro bono services. But the numbers don't capture the most important part of this story. What matters most is that Sophia is now in college studying exactly what she planned, surrounded by peers who share her commitment to using creativity for social good. She calls regularly to share ideas about projects she's working on, to ask advice about challenges she's facing, and to tell me about the mentorship relationships she's building with younger students who are just beginning to discover their own potential. Marcus and I have built a marriage based on partnership rather than performance, where both of our careers are valued and supported, where decisions are made collaboratively, and where success is measured by how well we're fulfilling our individual potential while strengthening our connection to each other and our community. The Blackwood family has become genuine allies in work that matters to all of us, contributing their resources and connections in service of organizations and causes that create positive change rather than just social status. We've learned that changing long-held patterns is possible when people are willing to acknowledge past mistakes and commit to different choices going forward. Most importantly, I've learned that waiting for permission to be extraordinary is a choice, not a necessity. You don't need anyone else's validation to pursue work that matters to you, to build something meaningful with your talents, or to refuse to accept other people's limitations as your own. The courage to speak your truth, to claim your space, and to demand the respect you deserve isn't something you have to wait to develop. It's something you can choose to exercise right now, today, in whatever situation you're currently facing. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, know that your voice matters more than you realize. If you've ever been dismissed or underestimated, remember that other people's assumptions about your potential say nothing about what you're actually capable of achieving. And if you're raising children or mentoring young people, remember that they're watching how you respond to challenges, how you advocate for yourself, and how you use whatever success you achieve to create opportunities for others. The world needs what you have to offer. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, and don't wait for perfect conditions to begin building the life you actually want to live. Start where you are, use what you have, and trust that taking the first step will reveal the path forward, even when you can't see the destination from where you're standing today. Your story is still being written, and you get to decide what happens next. The phone call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3 months after our lives had seemingly settled into their new, healthier rhythm. The shrill ring cut through the darkness of our bedroom like a blade, and I knew immediately that whatever was on the other end of that line would shatter the peace we had fought so hard to build. "Isabella?" The voice was Patricia's, but stripped of all the composed authority I had grown accustomed to. She sounded terrified, broken, like someone calling from the edge of a cliff. "Something terrible has happened. I need your help." Marcus stirred beside me, immediately alert in the way that years of emergency calls had trained him to be. But this wasn't about a legal case or a family emergency. This was something else entirely, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up even before Patricia explained why she was calling. It's about your company, she continued, her words tumbling over each other in panic. Someone's been investigating you, digging into your finances, your client relationships, everything. They've contacted me, Victoria, even Robert. They're asking questions about money laundering, about whether you've been using the business to hide illegal activities. The world tilted sideways. I sat up in bed, my mind racing through every client relationship, every financial transaction, every business decision we had made over the past 3 years. Our books were clean, our practices were ethical, our client relationships were transparent. But I knew that innocence didn't always protect you when someone was determined to destroy what you had built. Who's investigating? I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. What agency? What kind of accusations? It's not official, Patricia said, and I could hear her pacing in the background. It's a private investigator, someone hired by an unnamed client. They showed me documents. Isabella. Financial records that supposedly show suspicious transactions, client communications that they claim demonstrate fraudulent activity. I know it's not true, but they're very convincing, and they're saying they're going to take everything to the authorities unless... She trailed off, and I felt ice forming in my veins. Unless what? Unless you agree to sell the company and disappear quietly. They want you to transfer all your assets, fire your employees, and essentially vanish from the business world. They're giving you 72 hours to decide. Marcus was fully awake now, his hand finding mine in the darkness. Sophia's room was just down the hall, and I thought about my daughter sleeping peacefully, unaware that the life we had built was under attack by enemies we couldn't even identify. I'm coming over, I said, already reaching for clothes. Don't talk to anyone else until I get there. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and don't let them intimidate you into making promises about what you will or won't do. The drive to Patricia's house took 12 minutes, but it felt like hours. My mind was cataloging every possible enemy, every business rival, every client relationship that might have gone wrong in ways I hadn't recognized. Our success had made us visible, and visibility always came with risks that you couldn't fully anticipate or control. Marcus drove while I called our attorney, our accountant, and our head of security, a former FBI agent named Diana Chen, whom we had hired 6 months earlier when our client base began including some high-profile organizations that required enhanced confidentiality protocols. Diana answered on the first ring, her voice alert despite the early hour. This sounds like corporate extortion, she said after I explained the situation. Someone who wants to acquire your business or destroy your reputation has manufactured a crisis designed to force you into compliance. The question is who benefits from your disappearance and why they think they can get away with this approach. Patricia met us at the door in her robe, her usually perfect composure completely shattered. She handed me a manila envelope containing photocopied documents that made my blood run cold. Financial statements showing transactions I had never authorized, email communications I had never sent, client contracts with terms I had never agreed to. It was sophisticated, comprehensive, and completely fabricated. How did they get our letterhead? Marcus asked, studying the forged documents. How did they replicate your signature so accurately? Diana arrived 20 minutes later with a laptop bag and a grim expression that told me she understood exactly how serious the situation was. She spread the forged documents across Patricia's dining room table and began photographing each page while asking rapid-fire questions about our business practices, our employee vetting procedures, and our digital security protocols. Someone with significant resources and technical capabilities has been planning this for months, she concluded after reviewing everything. The level of detail in these forgeries suggests they had inside access to your systems, your files, maybe even your physical office space. This isn't random corporate espionage. This is personal. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Someone who knew us, who had been close enough to our operation to gather detailed intelligence, was now using that information to destroy everything we had built. But who? And why now? Just when we were finally experiencing the success and recognition that had taken years to achieve? Sophia appeared in the doorway of Patricia's kitchen at 6 a.m., still in her pajamas but wide awake and clearly aware that something major was happening. "Mom? Dad said there was an emergency. Are you okay?" Looking at my daughter, I felt a rage unlike anything I had experienced before. Whoever was behind this attack wasn't just targeting my business or my reputation. They were threatening the future I had built for Sophia, the example I had tried to set about what was possible when you refuse to accept other people's limitations as your own. "Someone is trying to hurt our company," I told her honestly, because I had learned that protecting children from truth often left them more vulnerable than knowledge did. "But we're going to figure out who and why, and we're going to stop them." Sophia's expression hardened in a way that reminded me powerfully of the night she had stood up to Patricia at Christmas dinner. "What can I do to help?" Diana looked up from her laptop where she had been running background checks on our recent clients and business contacts. "Actually, Sophia might be more helpful than you realize. Teenagers often notice things that adults miss, especially about digital communications and social media patterns. If someone has been surveilling your family, she might have seen signs that didn't register as significant at the time." We spent the next 2 hours reconstructing the past 6 months, looking for patterns, anomalies, or incidents that might have been reconnaissance disguised as routine interactions. Sophia proved to be remarkably observant, remembering details about suspicious phone calls, unexpected visitors to our office, and social media activity that had seemed odd but not threatening. "There was this woman who came to 3 of your speaking events," Sophia said, pulling up photos on her phone. "She always sat in the back, always asked questions about your business model and client relationships. She said she was a journalism student writing about social impact design, but something about her felt off." Diana immediately began running facial recognition software on the photos Sophia had taken, cross-referencing them with databases of known corporate spies and private investigators. Within an hour, she had identified the woman as Rebecca Thornfield, a former attorney who now specialized in corporate intelligence gathering for wealthy clients seeking to acquire or destroy competing businesses. "Bingo," Diana said, pulling up Rebecca's professional profile. She works exclusively for high-net-worth individuals and family offices that want to eliminate business competition through legal but ethically questionable means. If we can identify who hired her, we'll know who's behind your current situation." The investigation took on new urgency as we realized we were dealing with professionals who had been systematically gathering intelligence about our operation for months. They knew our vulnerabilities, our key relationships, our financial structures, and our family dynamics. This wasn't just business competition. It was warfare, conducted through manipulation and intimidation. Marcus proved surprisingly effective at leveraging his family's business connections to gather intelligence about Rebecca's recent clients and potential motives for targeting our company. His father's network included several people who moved in the same elite circles as corporate intelligence operatives, and Robert approached the investigation with the same strategic thinking he brought to investment analysis. "I've identified 3 potential suspects," Robert reported during an evening strategy session at our house. "All wealthy individuals or family foundations that have expressed interest in entering the social impact design space, all with histories of using aggressive tactics to eliminate competition, and all with connections to Rebecca Thornfield's network." The most likely candidate was Harrison Blackstone III, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune who had recently announced plans to launch a foundation focused on healthcare communications. Our company had been selected over his preferred consulting firm for a major project with the World Health Organization, and according to Robert's sources, Harrison had taken the rejection as a personal insult rather than a business decision. "He's the type who believes that money should guarantee success," Robert explained. "When merit-based competition doesn't work in his favor, He tends to explore alternative approaches to achieving his objectives. Destroying your reputation would clear the field for his own ventures while satisfying his desire for revenge. Diana's investigation confirmed that Harrison had hired Rebecca 6 months earlier, immediately after our WHO selection was announced. The timeline matched perfectly with the increase in suspicious activity around our business, and financial records showed payments from Harrison's family foundation to Rebecca's consulting firm that corresponded with her surveillance of our operations. But knowing who was behind the attack didn't immediately solve our problem. The forged documents were sophisticated enough to create serious legal complications, even if we could eventually prove they were fraudulent. Harrison's wealth gave him access to legal resources that could tie up our business in expensive litigation for years, potentially destroying our reputation and financial stability even if we ultimately won. "We need to flip the script," Diana suggested during one of our late-night strategy sessions. "Instead of playing defense against their accusations, we need to put them on offense by exposing their illegal surveillance and extortion attempts. But we'll only get one chance to do this right, so we need to gather irrefutable evidence before we make our move." The plan we developed was risky but elegant. Diana would pose as a potential client for Rebecca's services, recording conversations that would document the illegal tactics being used against us. Meanwhile, Sophia would continue monitoring social media and digital communications for evidence of the surveillance network that had been targeting our family. Marcus and I would maintain normal business operations while secretly documenting every attempt at intimidation or manipulation. Patricia, Victoria, and Robert would serve as witnesses to the extortion attempts, ensuring that we had credible testimony about the threats being made against our family. The most challenging part was continuing to run our business normally, while living under constant threat. Our employees sensed that something was wrong, but we couldn't risk exposing them to retaliation by sharing details about the investigation. I found myself second-guessing every decision, wondering if seemingly routine client communications might be intercepted or misrepresented by our adversaries. Sophia proved to be remarkably resilient under pressure, treating the investigation like an intellectual puzzle rather than a personal attack. Her digital forensic skills, developed through high school computer science courses, allowed her to trace communication patterns and identify fake social media accounts that were being used to gather intelligence about our family. "I found something," she announced one evening, bursting into my office with her laptop. "Remember that journalism student who kept showing up at your events? She's been running at least 12 different social media profiles, all designed to connect with people in your network and gather information about your business practices." The evidence Sophia had gathered was damning. Rebecca had created an entire ecosystem of fake identities designed to infiltrate our professional and personal networks. She had posed as potential clients, competing designers, nonprofit administrators, and even college students researching social impact careers. The scope of the surveillance was breathtaking and clearly illegal. Diana's undercover operation provided the final pieces of evidence we needed. Posing as a wealthy widow seeking to destroy a business rival, she had recorded Rebecca describing exactly how they had fabricated evidence against our company, including details about forged documents, planted witnesses, and planned media leaks, designed to destroy our reputation. "They've documented everything," Diana reported after her final meeting with Rebecca. "The scope of their operation, the illegal methods they've used, the threats they've made against your family." Harrison thought he was being clever by using intermediaries, but Rebecca kept detailed records that implicate him directly in conspiracy, extortion, and corporate espionage. The confrontation came exactly 72 hours after Patricia's initial phone call, but not in the way Harrison had planned. Instead of meeting his demands for our surrender, we arrived at his attorney's office with federal agents, recorded evidence of his illegal activities, and a civil lawsuit seeking damages for corporate espionage and attempted extortion. Harrison's ire. Shock at seeing Diana enter the room with FBI credentials was almost comical. The man who had spent months orchestrating our destruction suddenly found himself facing federal charges and the complete exposure of his illegal surveillance network. Rebecca, faced with the choice between cooperation and prosecution, immediately agreed to testify against her former client in exchange for reduced charges. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Harrison snarled as federal agents placed him under arrest. "My family has resources you can't imagine. This isn't over." But it was over. At least the immediate threat to our business and family. Harrison's arrest made national news, exposing a network of corporate espionage that had targeted dozens of small businesses, whose success threatened established players in various industries. Our case became a landmark example of how wealthy individuals were using illegal tactics to maintain market dominance. The aftermath brought unexpected benefits. The publicity surrounding our victory attracted new clients who wanted to work with a company that had proven it could stand up to powerful adversaries. Our employee team, initially shaken by the revelation of how we had been targeted, became fiercely loyal to an organization that had protected them from retaliation while fighting for justice. Sophia's role in exposing the surveillance network earned her recognition from cybersecurity professionals and college admissions officers who were impressed by her technical skills and investigative abilities. She received scholarship offers from multiple universities and was invited to speak at conferences about digital privacy and corporate accountability. "I learned something important during all of this," she told me as we sat in our office late one evening, reviewing the legal documents that had officially cleared our company of all fabricated charges. "Success doesn't just make you visible to people who want to support you. It also attracts people who want to destroy you. But that doesn't mean you should stay small to avoid making enemies." Looking at my daughter, I realized that this experience had taught her something invaluable about the reality of building something meaningful in a world where not everyone wants to see you succeed. She had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to do what was right despite being afraid. The criminal trial that followed Harrison's arrest revealed the full scope of his illegal activities. He had targeted 17 different businesses over 5 years, using corporate espionage and extortion to eliminate competition for his various ventures. Our case was the first time anyone had successfully fought back, and our victory encouraged other victims to come forward with their own experiences. Harrison was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay millions in restitution to the businesses he had targeted. Rebecca received a lighter sentence in exchange for her cooperation, but her career as a corporate intelligence operative was effectively over. The scandal destroyed Harrison's family foundation and served as a warning to other wealthy individuals who might consider using illegal tactics to maintain their market advantages. More importantly, the experience strengthened our family in ways that I hadn't anticipated. Marcus had proven himself capable of fighting for our shared interests when they were truly threatened, rather than simply deferring to his family's expectations or avoiding conflict. Patricia, Victoria, and Robert had demonstrated genuine loyalty by refusing to be intimidated into abandoning us when doing so might have been easier. Sophia had discovered capabilities and courage that would serve her throughout her life, learning that she could face down powerful adversaries and emerge stronger rather than diminished. She had seen firsthand that justice was possible when people were willing to fight for it, and that success came with responsibilities to protect not just yourself but others who might be similarly targeted. Our business emerged from the crisis stronger and more purpose-driven than ever. We implemented new security protocols, expanded our legal and investigative capabilities, and developed partnerships with other companies that had faced similar attacks. We became advocates for corporate accountability and digital privacy rights, using our platform to expose predatory practices that threatened ethical businesses. The experience also deepened my understanding of what it meant to build something truly meaningful. Success wasn't just about achieving your own goals. It was about creating systems and relationships that could withstand attempts to destroy them. It was about building not just businesses, but communities of people committed to protecting and advancing shared values. If you're building something that matters, if you're challenging established systems or creating alternatives to existing power structures, you need to understand that success will eventually attract opposition from people who benefit from the status quo. That opposition might come in forms you don't expect, from adversaries you can't immediately identify, using tactics that seem overwhelming and impossible to counter. But what I learned from surviving Harrison's attack is that the same qualities that enable you to build something meaningful, creativity, persistence, strategic thinking, and the ability to inspire others, are exactly the qualities you need to defend what you've built when it comes under assault. You don't have to be a victim of other people's schemes or accept destruction as the price of visibility. You can fight back, you can win, and you can emerge from conflict stronger and more committed to your mission than ever before. But you can't do it alone. You need allies, you need skills beyond your core expertise, and you need the courage to take risks in defense of what you've worked to create. The world needs people who are brave enough to build alternatives, challenge existing systems, and refuse to accept that power should determine outcomes rather than merit. But if you're going to be one of those people, you need to prepare not just for success, but for the attempts to destroy that success that will inevitably follow. Build strong relationships, develop diverse capabilities, and never forget that your greatest protection against those who want to destroy what you've created is the community of people who benefit from your success and believe in your mission. When you're fighting for something bigger than yourself, you'll discover that you're not fighting alone. Your story isn't over when you achieve success. It's just beginning a new chapter where the stakes are higher, the challenges are more complex, and the opportunities to make a real difference in the world become greater than you ever imagined possible. The victory over Harrison Blackstone should have been the end of our story, but life has a way of presenting new challenges just when you think you've mastered the old ones. 6 months after Harrison's conviction, as our company was experiencing unprecedented growth and recognition, I received a phone call that would test everything we had learned about resilience, family, and the true meaning of success. "Mom, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." Sophia's voice came through my office phone with an intensity that immediately commanded my full attention. She was calling from her dorm room at Stanford, where she had been, thriving in her combined program of design thinking and social policy. But something in her tone suggested this wasn't about grades or campus life. "I've been getting offers," she continued, her words carefully measured. "Big offers. From companies that want to hire me before I even graduate. Tech giants, consulting firms, even government agencies that somehow know about my role in exposing Harrison's surveillance network. The money they're talking about is life-changing, Mom. More than our entire family made in some years." I felt a familiar chill, the same instinct that had warned me about Rebecca Thornfield's too convenient appearances at my speaking events. "What kind of offers, sweetheart? And why do they feel the need to recruit someone who's still a sophomore?" "That's just it," Sophia said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "They're not really interested in my design skills or my policy knowledge. They want me because of what I know about corporate espionage, digital forensics, and how to expose illegal surveillance operations. They want to weaponize what I learned while protecting our family." The implications hit me. Like a physical blow, my daughter, barely 19 years old, was being recruited by organizations that wanted to use her investigative abilities for purposes that might not align with the values we had fought so hard to protect. The skills that had saved our family were now making her a target for a different kind of exploitation. "Some of these offers come with signing bonuses that would pay off my entire college education," Sophia continued. "Others include graduate school funding, research opportunities, even the chance to work on projects that could influence national policy. But Mom, when I ask specific questions about what I'd actually be doing, the answers get vague really quickly." I closed my eyes, thinking about the conversation we'd had after Harrison's arrest, when Sophia had expressed excitement about using her technical skills to help other families protect themselves from similar attacks. That genuine desire to help people was exactly what these recruiters were trying to exploit, offering her resources and opportunities while obscuring their true intentions. "What does your instinct tell you?" I asked, falling back on the lesson I had tried to teach her since childhood. That internal wisdom was often more reliable than external pressure, no matter how attractive the packaging. "My instinct tells me that something is wrong," she admitted. "These people know too much about our family, our business, even details about the Harrison case that weren't made public. It feels like we're being studied again, but this time they're trying to recruit me instead of destroy us." The pattern was disturbingly familiar, but with a sophisticated twist that demonstrated how much our adversaries had learned from Harrison's failed attack. Instead of trying to destroy what we had built, they were attempting to co-opt the next generation, to channel Sophia's talents toward purposes that would serve their interests rather than her values. I immediately called Diana Chen, who had transitioned from providing security services to helping other families navigate similar threats. Her company had grown significantly as word spread about the increasing sophistication of corporate espionage targeting successful entrepreneurs and their families. "This is the new model," Diana explained when I described Sophia's situation. "Instead of trying to destroy established businesses, they're identifying and recruiting the next generation of talent before they have a chance to build independent operations. It's more efficient and less risky than the scorched earth approach Harrison used." The investigation Diana launched revealed a network of recruitment firms, think tanks, and consulting companies that were systematically identifying college students with specific skill sets and family backgrounds that made them valuable assets for corporate intelligence operations. Sophia's combination of technical abilities, investigative experience, and family connections made her an especially attractive target. "They're not just recruiting her for what she knows," Diana reported after a week of investigation. "They're recruiting her for who she could become. If they can shape her early career trajectory, they can influence how she uses her talents for decades to come. It's a long-term strategy for controlling people who might otherwise become threats to established power structures." The sophistication of the approach was breathtaking. Rather than the crude intimidation tactics Harrison had employed, this new generation of corporate manipulation relied on seduction, opportunity, and the natural desire of young people to make a meaningful impact on the world. They were offering Sophia exactly what she wanted most: the chance to use her skills for social good, while quietly directing those efforts toward outcomes that served their clients' interests. Marcus proved surprisingly insightful about the psychological dimensions of what Sophia was facing. His own experience of being pulled between family loyalty and personal values had given him a deep understanding of how external pressures could gradually reshape someone's priorities without them realizing what was happening. "They're not trying to corrupt her," he observed during one of our family strategy sessions. "They're trying to redirect her idealism toward their preferred targets. They want her to fight corruption and expose wrongdoing, but only when it serves their purposes. It's more insidious than outright bribery because it appeals to her genuine desire to do good." The challenge was helping Sophia navigate these opportunities without becoming cynical about the possibility of making a positive impact through her career. We needed to distinguish between legitimate organizations that shared her values and sophisticated manipulation designed to exploit her idealism for corporate purposes. Patricia surprised everyone by becoming Sophia's most effective mentor during this period. Her decades of experience in high society philanthropy had given her an intimate understanding of how wealthy individuals and powerful organizations used charitable giving and social impact initiatives to advance their own interests while maintaining public facades of altruism. "The key is to ask uncomfortable questions," Patricia advised during one of her regular video calls with Sophia. "Who funds their operations? What are their actual outcomes rather than their stated intentions? How do they handle situations where doing the right thing conflicts with their donors' interests? Legitimate organizations will welcome these questions. The others will deflect or become defensive. Sophia applied this framework to evaluating her various opportunities, and the results were revealing. Several of the most attractive offers came from organizations that couldn't provide clear answers about their funding sources, their actual impact on the communities they claim to serve, or their decision-making processes when facing ethical dilemmas. The most troubling discovery came when Sophia traced the financial connections between some of her recruiters and Harrison Blackstone's network of associates. Despite his conviction and imprisonment, his allies were continuing his work, through different methods, attempting to neutralize potential threats by incorporating them into systems they controlled. "It's brilliant in a horrible way," Sophia told me during one of our weekly calls. "Instead of trying to destroy people who might expose them, they're recruiting those people before they become threats. They're building an army of idealistic, young professionals who think they're fighting for justice but are actually protecting the status quo." This realization led Sophia to make a decision that demonstrated the depth of her understanding about the true nature of the choices she was facing. Rather than accepting any of the lucrative offers, she decided to spend her summer break working with Diana's company, learning how to help other families identify and resist similar recruitment efforts. "I want to understand how this system works from the inside," she explained. "Not so I can join it, but so I can help other people avoid the traps I almost walked into. If they're systematically recruiting college students with my profile, there must be hundreds of other families dealing with similar pressures." The internship with Diana's company opened Sophia's eyes to the scope of the problem we were confronting. Corporate espionage had evolved far beyond the crude tactics Harrison had employed, developing into a sophisticated ecosystem of influence operations designed to shape public policy, business competition, and social movements in ways that served the interests of the ultra-wealthy. Young people with technical skills, family connections, or demonstrated ability to expose wrongdoing were being systematically identified and recruited by organizations that appeared to be working for social justice but were actually serving corporate interests. The recruitment process was so sophisticated that many targets never realized they were being manipulated, believing they were pursuing their own values while actually advancing someone else's agenda. Sophia's work with Diana revealed patterns that had implications far beyond our own family's experience. College students across the country were reporting similar recruitment approaches, always offering exactly what the individual most wanted: research, funding, career opportunities, chances to work on meaningful projects, while gradually directing their efforts toward outcomes that served hidden agendas. "We're not just dealing with isolated incidents," Sophia reported after completing her summer internship. "This is a systematic campaign to co-opt the next generation of social change agents before they can develop independent power bases. It's preventive warfare against people who might otherwise challenge existing systems." The scope of what we were discovering demanded a response that went beyond protecting our own family. Working with Diana and a growing network of families who had faced similar challenges, we began developing resources to help parents and students identify and resist sophisticated recruitment efforts designed to exploit idealistic young people. Our company pivoted to include educational services alongside our design work, creating workshops and resources that taught families how to evaluate opportunities, identify manipulation tactics, and maintain their values while building successful careers. We partnered with colleges and universities to provide students with frameworks for assessing potential employers and avoiding organizations that might exploit their skills for unethical purposes. The work was deeply personal, but also had broader implications for protecting democracy and social justice from corporate capture. If organizations with unlimited resources could systematically recruit and redirect the most capable young people before they had chances to build independent platforms, they could effectively prevent the emergence of future generations of authentic social change agents. Sophia's experience became a case study that we shared in our educational programs, demonstrating how even families with significant resources and awareness could be targeted by sophisticated influence operations. Her story helped other students recognize similar patterns in their own recruitment experiences and make more informed decisions about their career paths. The response to our educational initiatives revealed the enormous hunger that existed for honest guidance about navigating career opportunities in an environment where corporate manipulation was becoming increasingly sophisticated. Young people who had sensed something wrong with attractive offers they had received found validation and practical tools for protecting themselves from exploitation. Parents who had felt helpless watching their children consider opportunities that seemed too good to be true discovered that their instincts were often correct, and that they could provide meaningful guidance without stifling their children's ambitions or career prospects. The work also attracted attention from journalists, researchers, and policy advocates who were beginning to understand the implications of systematic efforts to co-opt emerging talent before it could threaten established power structures. Our educational programs became part of a broader movement to expose and counter what was essentially a new form of corporate warfare against social change. Sophia's junior year at Stanford became an opportunity to apply everything she had learned about identifying and resisting manipulation while building genuinely meaningful career connections. Armed with frameworks for evaluating opportunities and detecting deception, she was able to pursue her interests in design and policy while avoiding the traps that had been set for her. Her research projects focused on developing technological tools that could help other students and families identify organizations with hidden agendas, creating databases of corporate connections that revealed funding sources and actual outcomes rather than stated missions. Her work gained recognition not from the organizations that had tried to recruit her, but from genuine advocacy groups that were fighting for transparency and accountability. The contrast was instructive. Legitimate organizations welcomed scrutiny, provided clear information about their funding and decision-making processes, and encouraged critical thinking about their work. The organizations that had been trying to recruit her became hostile when she asked uncomfortable questions, suggesting that her instincts about their true purposes had been correct. As Sophia's college career progressed, she began receiving different kinds of opportunities: invitations to speak at conferences about corporate manipulation, research collaborations with transparency advocates, and fellowship opportunities with organizations that had proven their commitment to authentic social change through years of consistent action rather than marketing campaigns. These genuine opportunities were often less glamorous and financially attractive than the initial recruitment efforts she had received, but they aligned with her values and offered real potential for meaningful impact. She was learning to distinguish between opportunities that would use her talents for someone else's agenda and opportunities that would allow her to pursue her own vision for social change. The family that emerged from this extended challenge was stronger and more sophisticated than the one that had faced Harrison's initial attack. We had learned not just how to defend what we had built, but how to help others avoid the traps we had encountered. Our business had evolved beyond design services to include education and advocacy work that protected families and communities from corporate manipulation. Marcus had developed expertise in corporate accountability that complemented his legal background, allowing him to provide practical guidance to other families navigating similar challenges. Patricia had become a formidable advocate for transparency and philanthropy, using her social connections to expose organizations that exploited charitable giving for corporate purposes. Victoria's nonprofit work had expanded to include educating young professionals about maintaining their values while building successful careers, drawing on her own experience of learning to see through sophisticated manipulation tactics. Robert had begun using his investment expertise to help families identify and avoid financial opportunities that might compromise their independence or values. Most importantly, Sophia had developed into a young adult who could navigate complex, ethical terrain without losing her idealism or her commitment to making a positive difference in the world. She had learned to ask the right questions, trust her instincts, and build relationships with people who shared her values rather than people who wanted to exploit them. The experience taught all of us that protecting what you build requires constant vigilance and continuous learning. The tactics used against families like ours were constantly evolving, becoming more sophisticated and harder to detect. But the fundamental principles for resisting manipulation remained consistent. Maintain your values, ask uncomfortable questions, trust your instincts, and build relationships with people who demonstrate their commitment to social good through consistent action rather than attractive rhetoric. As I watch Sophia prepare for her senior year, planning graduate school applications and considering career opportunities with organizations that have proven their integrity through years of observation and evaluation, I'm struck by how much stronger she is than I was at her age. She has tools for protecting herself that I had to learn through painful experience, and she has confidence in her ability to make good decisions that comes from successfully navigating real challenges rather than theoretical scenarios. The path we've traveled from that first Christmas dinner confrontation to Sophia's current position as a young adult who can resist sophisticated manipulation while pursuing meaningful work has been longer and more complex than I ever anticipated. But each challenge has taught us something valuable about building resilience, maintaining values, and protecting the people and principles that matter most. If you're raising children in a world where success makes you visible to people who want to exploit or redirect your family's talents, remember that the best protection you can provide isn't shelter from challenge, but tools for navigating complexity with integrity intact. Teach them to ask uncomfortable questions, trust their instincts, and evaluate opportunities based on demonstrated values rather than attractive promises. The world needs young people who can resist manipulation while maintaining their commitment to social change, but they can only develop that strength through experience, guidance, and the confidence that comes from knowing their families will support them in making difficult choices when easy options compromise their values. Your children are watching. How you handle pressure, how you make decisions when the stakes are high, and how you maintain your principles when doing so requires sacrifice. Give them examples of courage, integrity, and strategic thinking that will serve them when they face their own complex choices about how to use their talents in a world that will constantly try to redirect their energy toward someone else's agenda. The future depends on raising a generation that can't be bought, manipulated, or co-opted, but that remains committed to building a better world despite the obstacles they'll face. That's not just an aspiration. It's an achievable goal if you're willing to do the work required to make it happen. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.